The small town of Eldridge had always been shrouded in mystery, its history steeped in legends and tales of supernatural occurrences. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was a place where whispers of the past echoed through the narrow streets and ancient buildings. Among the most intriguing of these legends was that of the crystal skull, an artifact said to possess immense power and a dark curse. Our story begins with Julia, a spirited young archaeologist with a passion for uncovering hidden truths. Her fascination with the crystal skull was deeply personal, driven by the legacy of her grandfather, Professor William Hartley, a renowned archaeologist who had dedicated his life to finding the artifact. His cryptic notes and journal entries had led Julia to Eldridge, where she hoped to continue his work and uncover the truth behind the legend. Julia arrived in Eldridge on a crisp October morning, the air filled with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. As she stepped off the train, she took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. The town, with its charming old-world architecture and cobblestone streets, seemed like a place out of time, a perfect setting for a mystery waiting to be solved. Her first stop was the local library, a grand, ivy-covered building that had stood for over a century. The librarian, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman with a kind smile and a wealth of knowledge, greeted her warmly. "You're here about the crystal skull, aren't you?" Mrs. Thompson asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Julia nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. "Yes, my grandfather spent years searching for it. His notes led me here." Mrs. Thompson led Julia to a secluded corner of the library, where she pulled out an old, dusty tome. This book contains the legends of Eldridge. The crystal skull is said to be hidden in the old Willow estate, on the outskirts of town. But beware, many believe it to be cursed. Julia's curiosity was piqued. She thanked Mrs. Thompson and spent the rest of the day poring over the book, her mind racing with thoughts of the skull and its mysterious power. As she read, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of a great discovery, one that would change her life forever. The next morning, Julia set out for the Willow Estate, a sprawling mansion that had stood abandoned for decades. The estate was known for its eerie atmosphere and tales of ghostly apparitions, and Julia couldn't help but feel a shiver of excitement as she approached the entrance. The gate creaked open with a ghostly wail, and she stepped inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The interior of the mansion was a maze of dust-covered furniture and cobweb-draped chandeliers, a testament to its long abandonment. Julia followed the clues left by her grandfather's notes, which led her to the library. There, she discovered a hidden staircase behind a bookshelf, leading down to the basement. As she descended into the depths of the mansion, Julia felt a sense of foreboding. The air grew colder, and she could hear faint whispers echoing in the darkness. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and ancient artifacts, each one seemingly more mysterious than the last. Her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, and she pressed on, determined to find the crystal skull. In a dimly lit chamber at the end of the corridor, Julia found herself face to face with the crystal skull. It rested on a pedestal, its surface glimmering with an otherworldly light. The skull was exquisitely carved from clear crystal, its hollow eye sockets seeming to follow her every move. As Julia approached the skull, a sudden chill swept through the room, and she heard whispers echoing in the darkness. She reached out to touch the artifact, her fingers tingling with anticipation. But the moment she made contact, the whispers grew louder, and a shadowy figure materialized before her. The figure was that of a woman, her eyes filled with sorrow and rage. "You must not disturb the skull," she warned, her voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "It is cursed, and those who seek its power will pay a terrible price." Julia's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. "I have to understand the curse. My grandfather spent his life searching for this. I need to know the truth." The ghostly woman sighed, her form flickering in the dim light. "Very well. But know that the skull's power is not to be taken lightly. It was created by an ancient civilization, imbued with the essence of their most powerful sorcerer. The skull grants immense power, but at a terrible cost. Those who seek to harness its power are doomed to be consumed by it. Julia listened intently, her mind racing with questions. Is there a way to break the curse? The ghostly woman hesitated before nodding. There is a ritual, a way to release the skull's power and free those bound by its curse. But it is dangerous, and failure means a fate worse than death. Julia knew she had no choice. She had to try. The ghostly woman provided her with the instructions for the ritual, and Julia set to work. She gathered the necessary ingredients, each one more difficult to find than the last, and prepared the ritual in the chamber where the skull rested. Julia stood in the dimly lit chamber, the crystal skull gleaming ominously on its pedestal. The ghostly woman's warning echoed in her mind, but her determination to understand and break the curse drove her forward. She needed to gather the necessary ingredients for the ritual, but first, she had to navigate the labyrinthine basement of the Willow estate. As Julia retraced her steps through the narrow corridors, the air grew colder, and she felt an unsettling presence watching her. The basement was filled with ancient artifacts, each one more mysterious than the last. Dust-covered shelves lined the walls, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly shrouds. Julia's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She knew that finding her way through the maze would be a challenge, but she was determined to press on. The whispers that had accompanied her initial discovery grew louder, filling her mind with a sense of foreboding. After what felt like hours of navigating the twisting passages, Julia finally emerged into a larger chamber. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries depicting scenes of ancient rituals and ceremonies. In the center of the room stood an altar, surrounded by candles that had long since burned out. Julia approached the altar cautiously, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. She noticed a small, ornate box resting on the altar, its surface covered in intricate carvings. With trembling hands, she opened the box and found a piece of parchment inside. The parchment contained a list of ingredients needed for the ritual, written in her grandfather's handwriting. The ingredients were rare and difficult to find, but Julia was determined to gather them all. She made a mental note of the items and set out to explore the rest of the basement. As she ventured deeper into the labyrinth, she encountered more ghostly apparitions, their forms flickering in and out of existence. Julia's determination and resourcefulness guided her through the maze, and she eventually found her way back to the main floor of the mansion. The first ingredient on the list was a rare herb known to grow in the haunted forest just outside of town. The sun had already begun to set as Julia made her way to the edge of the forest. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the fading light. The forest was known for its ghostly apparitions and supernatural occurrences, and Julia couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as she stepped into the shadows. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. Julia kept her flashlight at the ready, her senses on high alert. The forest was filled with strange noises, the rustling of leaves, the distant hooting of an owl, and the faint whispers that seemed to follow her every step. As she ventured deeper into the forest, Julia's flashlight beam revealed a narrow path winding through the trees. She followed the path, her heart pounding with anticipation. The first ingredient on her list, a rare herb called nightshade blossom, was said to grow in the heart of the forest, near an ancient, gnarled tree. Julia's journey was fraught with danger. Ghostly apparitions appeared from the shadows, their forms flickering like smoke. Some whispered warnings, while others reached out with spectral hands, trying to lead her astray. Julia's determination and quick thinking helped her navigate the treacherous terrain, and she pressed on, guided by the faint glow of the crystal skull's energy. After what felt like hours of navigating the winding path, Julia finally reached the heart of the forest. There, she found the ancient tree, its twisted branches reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. At the base of the tree grew the nightshade blossom, its petals glowing with a soft, ethereal light. Julia carefully harvested the herb, her hands trembling with excitement. She placed it in a small pouch and turned to make her way back to the mansion. The forest seemed to come alive around her, the whispers growing louder and the shadows dancing in the corners of her vision. But Julia's determination remained unwavering, and she eventually found her way back to the edge of the forest. The second ingredient on Julia's list was a vial of water from the cursed river that ran through the outskirts of Eldridge. The river was known for its haunted waters and the malevolent spirits that were said to dwell within its depths. Julia knew that retrieving the water would be a dangerous task, but she was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she approached the riverbank, the air grew thick with an otherworldly mist. The water was dark and murky, reflecting the moonlight in an eerie, shimmering glow. Julia could hear faint whispers and the distant cries of spirits echoing across the surface. She knelt by the water's edge, her heart pounding with anticipation. Carefully, she filled a small vial with the cursed water, her hands trembling as she sealed it tightly. As she stood up, the air around her grew colder, and she felt a presence watching her from the shadows. Suddenly, the water spirits emerged from the river, their forms twisting and writhing like liquid shadows. They reached out with ghostly hands, their eyes filled with malice. Julia's heart raced, but she stood her ground, determined to protect the vial of cursed water. Using her wits and resourcefulness, Julia managed to evade the spirits and make her way back to the safety of the riverbank. The mist began to dissipate, and the malevolent presence that had filled the air seemed to fade away. Julia took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief as she secured the vial of cursed water in her pouch. The third ingredient on Julia's list was a fragment of crystal from the ancient ruins that lay hidden in the hills beyond Eldridge. The ruins were said to be guarded by malevolent spirits and hidden traps, making the journey there perilous. But Julia's determination and bravery guided her as she set out on the next leg of her quest. As she climbed the steep, rocky path leading to the ruins, Julia couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder. The ruins were a testament to an ancient civilization, their crumbling walls and towering columns standing as silent witnesses to the passage of time. The air grew colder as she approached the entrance to the ruins, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble with an unseen force. Julia took a deep breath and stepped inside, her flashlight beam illuminating the darkened corridors. The walls were adorned with faded carvings and symbols, hinting at the ancient rituals that had once taken place within these hallowed halls. As she ventured deeper into the ruins, Julia encountered hidden traps and malevolent spirits that seemed determined to stop her. She used her intelligence and quick thinking to navigate the treacherous environment, avoiding the traps and outsmarting the spirits. Eventually, Julia reached the heart of the ruins, where she found a chamber filled with glittering crystal fragments. She carefully selected a piece, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light, and secured it in her pouch. The spirits that had guarded the ruin seemed to sense her determination, and they allowed her to leave without further hindrance. With 3 of the 4 ingredients secured, Julia returned to Eldridge, her mind racing with thoughts of the final challenge. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the town's history than she had initially realized. Determined to uncover the hidden secrets, she made her way to the library to speak with Mrs. Thompson. The librarian greeted her warmly, her eyes filled with curiosity. "You've been busy, I see," Mrs. Thompson said with a knowing smile. "What can I help you with today?" Julia hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I need to know more about the history of Eldridge and its connection to the crystal skull. I've gathered most of the ingredients for the ritual, but I feel like there's something I'm missing." Mrs. Thompson's expression grew serious. She led Julia to a secluded corner of the library, where she pulled out a set of old, dusty volumes. These books contain records of a secret society that once existed in Eldridge. They sought the power of the crystal skull and were willing to do anything to obtain it. Julia's heart raced as she flipped through the pages, discovering accounts of mysterious disappearances, dark rituals, and hidden alliances. The society, known as the Order of the Skull, had been founded by a group of influential townspeople who believed the skull could grant them immense power and immortality. As she read, Julia realized that her grandfather had been aware of the society's existence and had been working to stop them. His notes hinted at a hidden chamber beneath the Willow estate, where the society had conducted their rituals and hidden their most valuable secrets. Determined to uncover the truth, Julia returned to the Willow estate, her mind filled with questions. She navigated the mansion's labyrinthine corridors until she found a hidden door concealed behind a tapestry. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open and descended a narrow staircase into the depths below. The chamber she entered was filled with the remnants of dark rituals, ancient tomes, ceremonial robes, and symbols etched into the stone walls. In the center of the room, she found a pedestal holding a small, ornate box. As she opened the box, she discovered the final ingredient for the ritual, a crystal shard, shimmering with an otherworldly light. Julia felt a sense of foreboding as she secured the shard in her pouch. She knew that the Order of the Skull would stop at nothing to obtain the crystal skull, and she had to act quickly to complete the ritual and break the curse. With all the ingredients in hand, Julia prepared for the final leg of her journey. The ritual site was located in a remote, dangerous location known as the Cursed Hollow, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead were said to blur. As she made her way to the hollow, Julia couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to close in around her. She knew that the Order of the Skull would be searching for her, and she had to be on high alert. When she reached the Cursed Hollow, the atmosphere was thick with an otherworldly energy. The ground was covered in a thin layer of mist, and the twisted trees cast long, eerie shadows. Julia found the ritual site, a circle of ancient stones, each one etched with symbols of power. She began to set up the ritual, placing the ingredients in their designated spots and drawing the necessary symbols on the ground. As she worked, the air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble. Suddenly, Julia heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see a group of hooded figures approaching, the members of the Order of the Skull. Their leader, a tall man with a sinister smile, stepped forward. "You've done well to gather the ingredients," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "But the crystal skull belongs to us. Hand it over, and we might let you live." Julia's heart pounded with fear, but she stood her ground. "I won't let you use the skull's power for your own gain. The curse must be broken." The leader's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold determination. "Very well. Then you leave us no choice." With a nod, the members of the order advanced, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Julia knew she had to act quickly. She recited the incantation, her voice growing stronger with each word. The air around her shimmered with energy, and the symbols on the stones began to glow. As the order closed in, Julia felt a surge of power coursing through her. The crystal skull began to glow with an intense light, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. She completed the incantation, and a blinding flash of light enveloped the hollow. When the light subsided, Julia found herself standing alone in the clearing. The members of the order had been thrown back by the force of the ritual, their bodies lying motionless on the ground. The air was still, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Julia felt a sense of relief and triumph as she realized that she had succeeded. The curse was broken, and the power of the crystal skull had been neutralized. She knelt by the skull, its surface now dark and lifeless, and placed it in a secure pouch. With the final ingredient secured and the Order of the Skull defeated, Julia prepared to complete the ritual and break the curse once and for all. She returned to the Willow estate, where she set up the ritual site in the chamber beneath the mansion. The air was thick with tension as she arranged the ingredients and lit the candles. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the whispers that had once filled the mansion grew louder. Julia took a deep breath and began the incantation, her voice steady and unwavering. As she recited the words, the air crackled with energy, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. The crystal skull began to glow with an intense light, its power surging through the chamber. Julia could feel the presence of Morgana, the ghostly woman who had warned her about the curse, guiding her through the final stages of the ritual. Suddenly, the room was filled with a blinding light, and Julia felt a surge of power coursing through her. The symbols on the walls glowed with an otherworldly energy, and the air was filled with a sense of impending change. As the ritual reached its climax, Julia felt a wave of relief wash over her. The curse was breaking, and the power of the crystal skull was being released. She completed the incantation, and the ground shook violently, as if the very foundations of the mansion were being torn apart. When the light finally subsided, Julia found herself standing in the chamber, the air still and calm. The crystal skull lay on the ground, its surface dark and lifeless. The oppressive atmosphere that had once filled the mansion had lifted, and a sense of peace and tranquility filled the air. The sun rose over Eldridge, casting a warm glow over the town. The curse that had plagued the town for generations had finally been lifted, and a sense of peace and renewal filled the air. Julia stood on the steps of the Willow estate, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The townspeople, grateful for her efforts, gathered to celebrate the end of the curse. They praised Julia's bravery and determination, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she saw the joy and relief on their faces. Mrs. Thompson, the librarian who had helped her uncover the town's hidden secrets, approached with a warm smile. "You did it, Julia. Your grandfather would be so proud." Julia nodded, her heart filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your help. Thank you for guiding me." The town honored Julia and her grandfather's legacy, celebrating the end of the curse with a festival that filled the streets with music, laughter, and joy. The crystal skull, now neutralized, was placed in a secure location, its power no longer a threat to the town. With the curse broken and peace restored to Eldridge, Julia decided to stay in the town, using her skills as an archaeologist to uncover more of its hidden history. She set up a small museum dedicated to the town's past, filled with artifacts and records that told the story of Eldridge and its people. The crystal skull was displayed in a secure glass case, a reminder of the power and danger that had once threatened the town. Visitors came from far and wide to learn about the legend and the courageous efforts of Julia and her grandfather. As she stood in the museum, surrounded by the town's history, Julia felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged stronger, her spirit unbroken. The curse of the crystal skull was a tale that would be remembered for generations, a symbol of the enduring human spirit and the quest for truth. With a renewed sense of purpose and a commitment to uncovering the mysteries of the past, Julia looked forward to new adventures and the continued pursuit of knowledge. The town of Eldridge, once shrouded in darkness, now stood as a beacon of hope and resilience. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey through The Curse of the Crystal Skull. If you enjoyed the story and loved diving into captivating tales, we would be delighted to have you as part of our storytelling community. Your support helps us continue to create and share more fantastic stories. Like this story to show your support. Share it with friends who appreciate a good narrative. Subscribe to our channel to stay updated with more exciting stories. Let's keep the magic of storytelling alive together. Happy reading and adventuring.